Hello, and welcome to DLE Miami Stars. Today we have a great interview. We have the privilege today of having Mr. Carlos Martinez, the public defender of the city of Miami. Carlos Martinez was born in Cuba and he moved with his family to Miami as a little boy. Then he attended Miami-Dade College, University of Texas, Florida International University, and got his JD at the University of Miami. He worked in different offices in Florida, in Washington, and he worked 12 years before he got elected as a public defender at the public defender office in Miami. Now Carlos is running for the re-election as a public defender of the city, and we are happy to have him today. So welcome, Carlos.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Let's start, since you are in campaign right now, the voters, they want to know about the man. So let's start asking questions about that. When you moved to Miami, you didn't speak a word of English.
Not at all. Yeah.
So can you recall those years in Miami?
Yeah. I was about to start 5th grade at Auburndale Elementary here in the city of Miami, and I was here. Obviously came with my parents, my sister who's older, my brother who's younger. My brother was just going into elementary school to go to kindergarten. And my sister was in the same classes as I was because they put us in an orientation class for all the kids who didn't speak English.
Wow. Carlos, in order to work and to serve the community as a public defender, you have to obviously develop a passion for service and to help the poor people that most of the times can't afford an attorney. Where that passion for serving comes from?
That actually goes all the way back to Cuba. Both of my parents were always very involved with the Catholic Church. And in Cuba, I didn't realize until later that they were actually rebelling when they were in Cuba. But in Cuba, they looked down at people who would go to church. You were treated very differently. And they had 2 strikes against them. One, because they went to church regularly. We all went to church regularly, but also because we wanted to leave Cuba and we had signed up to leave Cuba in the flights. But when we first came to the U.S., my mother first worked in several places before she ended up working at St. John Bosco Catholic Church, and so did my dad. My dad was the maintenance man and the janitor, and my mom was the receptionist at the church. And working in the Catholic Church, particularly, we were poor, as were a lot of the people, actually pretty much everyone who went to that church. You get to see what suffering is. You get to see the difficulty that people have when they don't have any money. You get to see people striving to get something better for themselves and for their families. So I was already exposed to people who were in need, and I was already exposed to the Catholic Church, to social justice and the idea that you have to help mankind and you have to help others. So I was already exposed to that. And I ended up in the public defender's office. It was not that I had a passion for it, because I didn't even know the public defender's office existed. We had never had a family member get in trouble. So we didn't know the public defender's office was here to serve. But in law school, I fell in love with this office when I did an internship with the office, and I realized this is what I was meant to do with my law degree. So that's where it comes from. It comes from my parents. It comes from my upbringing. It comes from my church. And then in law school, having been exposed to it, it's there and it's very real.
Did you, when you were going to school, when you were in law school and all that, did you have any mentors? Do you have somebody that you can say, wow, from this professor, from this attorney, I really learned something? Can you mention something?
There were a lot of people. There were a lot of people along the way. When I was in law school, the professor that actually set me on the path that I didn't even know I had was Nancy Barster, and she was the one that was running the summer honors program, in which I ended up working in this office. And she was very good in helping guide me as to what kinds of things I wanted to do, and to help me see things that I did not see for myself. So in law school, she was a big part of it, the dean of the law school. I was also very involved in a lot of activities in the law school. Mary Doyle, the dean of the law school, was very instrumental. Georgie Angones was another instrumental person. Dean Hausler. There were so many people. And a lot of it has to do that when I went to law school, unlike a lot of the students, I was the first one in my family who was going to law school. My parents could not afford to pay for my law school, so I had to work for law school, and then the rest of it came through student loans. And I actually had to sell my stocks. I had stocks in Exxon Company USA, but I had to sell them in order for me to be able not to work the first year of law school. So there were a lot of people along the way who helped out in law school, and even before law school. Before law school at Florida International University, one of my professors was Mark Rosenberg. And Mark Rosenberg is now the president of Florida International University. And Mark had a big impact on me because Mark was so critical at the first paper I wrote. He was so critical that when I saw the paper, I saw more red ink than white on the paper, because he had marked it all up. And he told me, I know you have it in you. I know you can get it done. I'm going to coach you how to write a better paper. And if you finish writing a good paper and then you get an A in the final, I'll give you an A and forgive. Let's forget what happened. Sure enough, I ended up getting an A in his class. So he was very instrumental in improving my writing. And the other person was John Stack, who's a professor, and now he's one of the deans at FIU as well, but he was a professor of political science, and he guided me, and I will always be thankful to him because he was my letter of recommendation to law school. And I had tried to find him, and I couldn't find him because I kept going back to FIU. I couldn't find him. And thankfully, somebody told me, you know, he's actually at the hospital. He's getting surgery. And back then, we didn't have any cell phones. So I figured, let me call the hospital. So I called the hospital, asked to speak to him, and I said, my application is due. Is there any way that, you know, when are you going to go to surgery? And he said, tomorrow. It's like, is there any way that if I get you the letter today, you can sign the letter? So he signed the letter from his hospital bed.
Wow.
The letter of recommendation from his hospital bed. So not only was he a great professor, a great mentor, but he was also a great friend by recommending me, and I got admitted into University of Miami.
Wow.
Yeah.
In a unique action, you started reaching the branch courthouses to assist people prosecuted for misdemeanors.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that, because it ended up that the community loved that. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. We go back probably about 40 years, 35 to 40 years ago, and when Miami was growing, Miami-Dade County added courthouses to different cities. So Coral Gables has a courthouse. We have one in South Dade. We have one in Hialeah. We used to have the Caleb Center, and we had one in the north. So what ended up happening is, because we had such an increase in cases, particularly misdemeanor cases, the cases could not be handled here at the central courthouse, that is by Jackson Hospital. We could not handle all the cases because it was 500,000 cases a year. I'm sorry. Well, if you include traffic, it is definitely even higher than that. But in misdemeanors, it was about 150,000 cases a year. So what happened was that Miami-Dade County and the courts decided, why don't we have some of these cases heard out in the communities on where they've gotten the tickets and where they've gotten the criminal citations for misdemeanors. Misdemeanor is a type of charge where somebody can do up to a year in jail. So it could be anything from a fine all the way to a year in jail. So In Miami-Dade County, they decided to have some of those cases go out to what's called the branch courts. But we did that, but the problem was we did not have enough assistant public defenders. We did not have enough attorneys to be able to send them out to branch court. So what's happened for 30 years or so, there were a lot of cases, hundreds of thousands, probably over 1 million cases, more than 1 million cases, that were handled out in the branch courts, and there was no attorney representation. And in the last year, actually the last 6 months, we have been looking at what some of the problems were, and Jim DeFede had done a particular news report in which he had investigated, particularly in South Dade, some of the problems. And we realized we have got to figure out a way how to staff those courts. Even if we're not appointed on all the cases, it is important for the public defender to be there so that my assistant public defenders are available, so anyone has a question about their right to counsel. And we have a right to be there, and everybody needs to know what their rights are under the law, and particularly they will talk to us about what the right to counsel mean and what some of the consequences are of getting a conviction on your record. So we are now staffing all the branch courts every week, and we're going to continue. I've expanded the experiment. We were going to do it for 6 months. I've now expanded it for another 6 months to see what the results are, and particularly in educating the community as far as that they need to make sure that they have an attorney representing them, whether they hire an attorney or the public defender gets appointed. It's important for people to have representation.
That's actually great. I have to read this. This is a question that it really is a little a concern for the community. The Criminal Justice Defense Function Committee at the American Bar Association says that the public defender offices around the country are overwhelmed with too many cases, too few judges, and underfunded offices. How do you deal with that?
Well, we have dealt pretty well with that, thank God, because of the reduction in the cases. Mm-hmm. In the last 5 years, we engaged in litigation back in 2008 and 2009 when we had too many cases and not enough attorneys. We wanted to make sure that the individuals had their right to an attorney respected by the courts and respected by the government. And at that time, we had specifically that same problem, that the attorneys were completely overloaded and the office could not manage the caseload. There's too many cases. When you were looking at, during that year in 2008 and 2009, our attorneys were handling about 450 felonies a year, which is an astronomical number, when the national standard is 150, and we were handling 450 per attorney. We are now down. We are now under 200. And what we have done in this office is we have done many things since we had that litigation. We have had video interviews with the clients, which means now we have video in the jails so that we can talk to the clients through video communication rather than our attorney having to drive in this horrible Miami traffic to the jail, which is 15 miles away, and essentially it would take you 1 hour one way, and it was awful because the attorneys were spending a lot of time on the road. So when we added the video, we were able to save a lot of attorney time. So now we're interviewing the clients. We're doing a lot of video interviews with the clients, so it saves the attorney time. And not only that, we're interviewing the clients earlier, so we can work on the cases earlier. So in terms of the caseload, we do not have the crushing caseloads that are described by the American Bar Association. We have, thank God, that we are now at a point where we can actually feel like we're doing what we need to do for the clients. I still don't have enough of a budget to be able to pay the salaries that we need to pay. I have attorneys who are, when they start, they're making $45,000. The attorneys, when you get a law degree, it takes 7 years. It's 4 years of undergraduate and 3 years of law school. which is very similar to a PhD. If one of my attorneys went and decided to go work for the school system, and the teachers, teachers are underpaid. Well, teachers actually make $49,000 if they have the equivalent of a PhD. So they make more than the attorneys. The teachers should be making more, my attorneys should be making more. And the reason why they should be making more is not just because we want to give taxpayer money away. It's because I want to be able to retain these high quality people that I bring in here. We spend a lot of time and a lot of money and effort in training because we want to make sure that the attorneys are competent and they're providing quality representation. But unfortunately, that investment that we do in this community and that we do into those new attorneys, that investment goes down the drain because attorneys can't stay here typically beyond 3 or 4 years. So if I had more money for the starting salary and more money as they go through, I feel that we could reduce the turnover, the attrition of the lawyers, and we could have better quality for a longer period of time in terms of the lawyers and not have to spend so much money and so much effort on training. So the money is we still need the money, but the caseloads are at a level right now that they're manageable, thank God.
Let's talk about the public persona. Let's talk about Carlos Martinez out there. You have been involved, and personally I've seen you in many of the get-togethers, the legal organizations. You've been involved in numerous volunteer organizations.
Yes.
What's the importance for you to be out there and getting together and listening to the people?
Look, the most important thing, and I learned that from the last public defender, I learned that from Bennett Brummer. And he was my mentor, and that's another person that I had not mentioned. But once I came to the office, he was truly a mentor. He was essentially like a father to me because I learned everything at his side in terms of how to be able to manage and really how to be in contact with the community. The benefit is that when I am out there, I can hear from the community how well we're doing or how we're not doing well. So I can hear about challenges that we're having from the community, from family members who have somebody going through the system and they identify some particular problem. And the benefit of that is that a lot of times it's not just what's happening in the courts, but what's happening outside. Whether it's that they're not safe in their community. For example, there's a community here that they call it, it's called Liberty Square in the Pork and Beans neighborhood. Unfortunately, the people in that neighborhood live under constant fear for shootings happening in the neighborhood. So when they have issues, and it's really interesting for me because when I initially became the public defender and when I worked with Bennett Brummer, I didn't realize how many peripheral issues there were. For example, just a year ago at the Martin Luther King parade, I'm walking down the street, I'm meeting different people, and somebody mentions to me that in their neighborhood, the lights aren't working. And it's in Liberty City, and the lights are out for 3 blocks. And I'm listening to this person, I'm thinking, I'm the public defender, what do I have to do with lights? Well, I have a lot to do with lights because I can pick up the phone and call the city of Miami, whether it's the mayor or a commissioner, or call the county mayor's office or one of the county commissioner's office and say, or even the police departments and tell them, is there anything we can do for this neighborhood, these 3 blocks that the lights are out and people feel unsafe and they feel like they cannot go outside. So that's one example that of the kinds of things that I can find out when I'm out there as to what people are worried about. People are very worried about how bad the traffic is down here. People are losing jobs, they're losing money because they end up being stuck in traffic an hour or 2 and they're hourly employees. There are people showing up to court late, many hours late because how bad the traffic is. And it's difficult to get even the public transit. Here, it's not that good. If you happen to miss it, then you're looking at another 30 minutes or 40-minute wait. So being out there, I can find out and I can pass that information to the other elected officials about what's going on. And I can also find out what's going on in terms of the different needs, whether it's school lunches, whether it's there are no activities in some particular schools after school, so the kids get in trouble and they get arrested. So for me, the benefit of being out there in the community and being involved with so many organizations, not just the lawyer organizations, is that I feel like I'm close to the general public, that I know the information. So when I speak to other elected officials, I'm coming not just from the perspective of the criminal justice system, but the perspective of we're all in Miami-Dade County, we're all residents, and we want to make this a better place.
That's great. I wanted to ask you about some of the programs and the initiatives that you personally have created in the time that you've been the public defender of the city. So let's do this. I'm going to be mentioning the name of the program,
Okay.
and you briefly explain so the community knows a little bit about those programs. Redemption Project.
The Redemption Project, I actually created that before I even became the public defender. We created that in 1998. And Redemption Project, we help people with sealing and expungement of their records. There are a lot of people that are not convicted of anything, but they have it on their record. And if they try to get a job, the employer sees it, and the employer doesn't know that it's actually not a criminal record because they have no conviction. So we started in 1998, and we've helped thousands of people throughout Miami-Dade County. And what we do is we go with the clerk of the court, the state attorney, and we go with different community groups, sometimes police or bailiffs, because they help us fingerprint, because you have to submit paperwork. And we go out into the community. We'll have a redemption fair. We'll get some people to apply, and then the state attorney approves some. The others they don't approve because the Florida law is very restrictive. But we are able to help people with the Redemption Project. That's what that is.
Next program, Equal Justice Roundtable.
We created the Equal Justice Roundtable again in the mid-2000s as a way to be able to reach out to the faith community and work with the faith community, because we don't have a media budget. So I can't be I don't have a person that I have spending money on media. So we figured out we need to get the information out on the consequences. We need to get the information out on Redemption Project, and we need to get the information out on what's happening in the courts and educating folks on what it is, the court process. A lot of people don't know what the criminal court process is. So what we did is we reached out to the faith community, to the Christian community, Jewish community, and Muslim community. And we have been meeting over the years, and essentially we will pick one or two topics for a year. We will discuss it. And I also discuss with them what our legislative priorities are for the year. So that's what the Equal Justice Roundtable is. It's just to talk about how do we get equal justice so that it doesn't matter how much money to have to determine the quality of justice that you get.
And finally, the Juvenile Justice CPR, which is charting a path to redemption.
Juvenile Justice CPR, we created it as part of all these community meetings that we had. We came up with a list of 55 different items, things that needed to be changed in juvenile justice, so that kids really had an opportunity to be able to grow up as law-abiding adults and responsible adults. And we've had some successes in some of those items. Some of them dealt with schools, and the schools have taken care of a lot of the issues. So that's what we did. We outlined essentially a reform agenda for juvenile justice, and we're still working on that.
Perfect. Carlos, we're coming actually to the last part of the interview, which is the legacy that you as a public defender are going to leave on the community. So if a young attorney just passed the bar and is coming to the public defender office, what would be your advice or your advices to that young attorney?
Well, what I tell the attorney is that they need to follow their passion. And they need to come in here knowing that I expect the attorneys to treat the clients as if it was their favorite family member. So that way you know that you are helping the person, you are not passing any judgment on the person, and you are giving it your best. And what I hope my legacy will be is that the attorneys that leave this office and go on, or even the ones who stay, that everyone out in the community or in whatever community they go live in, they will look at them as really good people. Not just great attorneys, but good people. People who care about the well-being of others, particularly the well-being of those who are left and left behind and who are lost, particularly the ones in prisons, the ones in jail, the ones that really need to find their way. I hope that they become better people by the work that they do here, and that they will reflect those values when they leave this office, that they will reflect the values that we have, which is to make this a better country by the way that we treat even the people that go through the system, even the people who have committed crimes, even the people who have committed serious crimes. We need to treat them with dignity and respect, and we need to treat them as human beings. So I hope that will be my legacy.
The last question, Carlos. We are all seeing the huge change that our city is going through, like investments coming from all over the world, huge buildings that are popping up everywhere, people actually coming from different parts of the country and from foreign countries too. This big change that our city is going through, and specifically because you are on a privileged position where you get to see every part of the city.
Right.
Are you optimistic about the future of Miami?
I am. I'm extremely optimistic. I wouldn't be doing this job if I wasn't optimistic. If I wasn't optimistic about what we can do to improve the system, to improve the community, and to really improve lives as we go through. And I am very optimistic. We're going to be facing a lot of challenges. There's always too much work and not enough money to do the work. So to me, it's an opportunity to be creative, to get creative about how you provide different services, to get creative and looking at, okay, if I have just this amount of money, what can I do with this money wisely? And I'm talking about the government. What can we do with the money wisely? And we start selecting the types of things that are going to have an impact on the quality of life. So I am very optimistic, and this place has actually been getting better for a long time. And even though a lot of folks are nervous about it, and the rest of the country and even the rest of the state looks at Miami, Florida, Miami-Dade County, and they look at it as that's another country. Well, it feels like another country because it's really an expansion of the American experience, because we're getting all the benefit of all the brain power and all the different cultures blending in this community and adding value to this community, that I think there's a richness here that you can't get anywhere. I lived in Washington State for a year. Beautiful place. One of the most beautiful places on earth, because nature there, everything is clean. You have huge mountains. You can, if you want to go, drive an hour, you're at the top, the peak of a mountain. You can do that. But what was missing for me is the richness of Miami-Dade County, that you have all the different cultures, you have all the different opinions, you have political intercourse that you have here is rich. A lot of people criticize it, but it's a rich American tradition that we just get to see it expanded and really more beautiful. So I'm very hopeful for the future.
Carlos, it's been an honor. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.